We're live. That was quick. Hey, everybody.
Hey,
we're only 3 minutes late.
There we
That's
go.
impressive.
Which is early for us, actually.
Yeah, and who knows? You know, as the weather gets warmer and the restrictions grow less, you know, we may see fewer and fewer people in here.
Are you asking me to wear my mask during the podcast?
No, I'm not. But Laura's in with us. Happy National Wine Day, Laura. We're
Hi,
drinking
Laura.
bourbon. We're drinking bourbon and gin.
And bourbon cream.
And bourbon cream. All of which are
something else. Dude, Solomon's got nothing on the how you do tell. Solomon has nothing on the how to tell you to run your business segment this evening. It's all on me. It's
okay.
It's all
sounds
me.
yeah.
It's all
sounds
me.
great.
I'm going to tell you how to make $1 million, Jason. Or billions of dollars.
The pet rock was already invented.
Man. God damn it!
How about a pet twig?
What about this? Is there something called chia pets? I've got this thing that grows grass all over the fucking place.
Jason is already regretting this decision. All right. You got it set up there?
Yeah.
I'm
right. Good.
Yeah. All right.
Hey, Brad.
Oh, did Brad join? No, I'm not in the comments. All right. You guys all set?
Dimitri, Jeff McKinney, all those people waiting in airport.
I'm always ready. I have been ready.
Whatever.
Since first.
At the sound of the tone, the official "We Like Drinking" time will be 5 o'clock. Commence consumption.
This week on episode 331 of the We Like Drinking podcast, we'll be discussing upstate New York fist bumps, and we're drinking some killer spirits with Jason Barrett from Black Button Distilling. So crack open that beer, uncork that wine, and let's get drinking. Oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching the show live, Jeff Solomon,
as you ought to do every Tuesday night around 7:30 Pacific. What's up?
You can see 3 absolutely chock full big ass bottles of booze that we need to hit up on tonight. So buckle up, folks. John's already chugging bourbon.
I'm not
it looks like
chugging anything yet. Yes.
So hold on, folks, is all we're saying. As I say, cheers, my podcast drinking friends, and welcome to Happy Hour 331 of your favorite award-winning topical beer and wine education podcast focusing on fun. We like to have so much of it. So make sure you never miss another episode of our brand of drinking fun by visiting welikedrinking.com/subscribe.
Subscribe. Yay.
So folks, we're going to get right into it. Like I said, we have a lot to get through, which is always means you're in for a good time. But let's find who we're drinking with and what we've got in our glasses. We're joined by our usual panel members. We have our California Sustainable Wine Growing Ambassador and recovering wine blogger, Jeff Solomon.
Hey, shalom, everybody.
Our commercial brewer and snake wrangler, John Ruyak.
I didn't brew anything today. I made mead.
And I am your host and certified specialist of wine, Jeff Eccles. Now, our guest this week started out serving as a young business consultant in Washington, D.C. He realized his dream of opening a distillery and pursuing a profession that would allow him to work with his hands. After attending several distilling schools across the country, he returned to Rochester, New York, and in 2013, officially opened the first craft distillery in the city since Prohibition. Please help us welcome the founder and master distiller of Black Button Distilling, Jason Barrett. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Yeah, woo, ow.
Thanks for having me, gentlemen.
So excited to have you on the show. Thank you so much for sending out all this booze to us. It's, you know, we have some folks on the show where stuff may not get here in time or really close, razor's edge. You guys got us here
that day.
Yeah. You guys got us the stuff way early, and I'm kind of surprised we have all 3 bottles.
Well, here's the
I
thing.
was sweating every day. I was staring at those bottles. I'm like, when?
I have to tell you, Jason. I got the box at work, right? And I sent a picture to my wife, and she said, "Oh fuck, what is that?" And I said, "I don't know, but we're gonna find out later this evening." And we got this 6 weeks ago?
Possibly.
There's a hefty dent in this, and
I was going to say, it looks pretty light in your.
I haven't had very much of this, and I've got a little secret for later on that's gonna make everybody happy.
John is holding up the bottle of bourbon cream. That is very delicious. We also have a bottle of their flagship bourbon. I assume that's your flagship.
Yep. That's what I started the company to make.
Yep. And the citrus forward gin that is awesome. Also,
it's as heavy as a kettlebell.
Is that what you work out with in the mornings there, Solomon?
Yeah.
Right.
So you can find
16-ounce curls.
You can find Black Button Distilling on their website at blackbuttondistilling.com and on Instagram at Black Button Distilling. So be sure to check those out. So let's find out. So Jason, I'm curious, are you drinking anything tonight, or are you just, I know it's pretty late where you're at. So what's in your glass?
So what was in my glass, but I got my drinking out just a little bit earlier, was a bourbon Manhattan, which is my favorite drink of choice. So it's Carpano Antica Vermouth, 2 shots of our 4-grain bourbon, little Fee Brothers Cherry Bitters, and then a 1/4 ounce of Grand Marnier.
Yes.
Oh,
that is to me the perfect Manhattan.
Nice. Dude. That sounds delicious. We have the bourbon cream. We have them all of them open. I poured myself an old fashioned to go after we get through the tasting. So hopefully I finish the show. We'll see what happens.
Well, we have to work the controls and be intelligent. We just have to talk.
This is true. So John, we'll come back to John. Jeff Solomon, what's in your glass?
Yeah, so I have right here the Black Button Distilling Citrus Forward Gin, and I'm a little surprised. I'll tell you why. I haven't even gotten into the gin yet. I haven't tasted it yet.
Yeah.
But John Ruyak from upstate New York, professional brewer, goes straight to the bourbon cream, calls dibs, and I look at the label. This is a citrus forward gin distilled with traditional botanicals, including citrus peel and New York State grown Cascade hops.
Boom!
You blew it, John Ruyak. You blew it.
I saw it, but I had to give somebody else the opportunity.
Jason, as I'm sticking my schnoz into this thing, I have to know, like, my eyes lit up as soon as I saw that there were hops in here. I have no idea how common it might be, whether or not distillers use hops. Are you guys setting the bar?
I actually got invited to a hop conference, and they wanted me to put on a panel of spirits. And they wanted 6 spirits with hops in it. I could only find 5. So, there's just not a lot out there. The hops, the resiny oils, if you're not very careful, will give like a stickiness to the spirit that you obviously want to avoid. But they're just a great earthy, aromatic piece, especially fresh Cascade hops. So we try to use them as fresh as we can, and then vacuum seal them whenever we can't get them fresh. So
wow, and I have to say, just on the nose, this is just beautiful. And I know that. Gosh, I mean, there's a lot of folks that say that they like gin, and then it's like you start asking them questions, and they're like, I just like whatever gin is there. And I'm kind of that way too. But on the nose, it's reminiscent to me of over in the Bay Area, we have St. George Distillery, and I know that they do like a Mount Tamalpais gin where they have like pine needles from Mount Tamalpais, and it's to me the citrusy notes, and then like this pininess that goes with the hops. It's making me think about that, and these are two totally different things, and yet there's just that local kind of craft feel that is in the nose that I just love. There's this other side, people who say that they don't like gin, and I'm like, have you never learned to?
Is that they don't like too much pine?
That's what it is. Have they never learned not to stop and smell the roses? Because like just the bouquet is just beautiful. And to all y'all listening at home right now, I just have this neat in a little like little bourbon tasting glass, and I'm just loving the aromatics. Let me get a little bit to wet my whistle, and then while y'all are talking about the other stuff, I am gonna make a nice, beautiful dry gin martini.
And it is remarkable on the nose. Like usually when you have a gin, the alcohol burn is very present on the nose, and it is not the case at all with this. Of the citrus, there's some pine. This has a beautiful nose to it.
Thank you.
And I am just loving the viscosity that comes along with it. There's a nice chewy mouthfeel, and just these citrusy and herbal notes. Like this is delicious. It's a little like minty around the gums and a little like numbing around the gums, which I'm liking quite a bit.
Are you getting almost like a licorice kind of play on
the anise? Yep, the star anise. Gonna do that.
Oh shit! I need to go get that bottle out of the cabinet.
This is a beaut. I'd hate to talk too much more about how delicious this is, because otherwise John Ruyak isn't going to be able to work tomorrow. But I
got assistance.
I have to. Okay, Jason, I do have to ask this. If one were to just drop an ice cube in this, are we going to see some of those like oils precipitate out and get a nice little luge going?
Yep, most likely. So it's one of the reasons why it's at 84 proof instead of 80, is because actually as it comes down even just a little bit more, you really start to come out of solution. And the early batches actually had like a bluish haze that it took a while to work out how to prevent that from coming over without having to then filter the gin. Because obviously you work on getting all these great flavors into it. You don't want to be pulling flavor out of it after you've made it.
Yeah, this is beautiful.
So
and for everybody who skipped a step along the way and they're just like big absinthe heads, you might want to dial it back and get into this. Is a beautiful gin. And
you were right, Jeff. There is a serious viscosity to this gin.
Is that from the oils of the citrus, Jason?
I think some of it's the oils of the citrus, and then the other part is just the house style at our distillery. A lot of the spirits just have a weight to them, and so since we're making the base wheat vodka in house, it has that heft.
Nice, cool.
And I just have to ask, since you brought it up, do you guys sell a nice base wheat vodka as well?
So we do, although only in our tasting room at this point. We switched to corn vodka. We make both. But it got to the point where I just couldn't keep having the conversation with people. Oh, it's a wheat vodka. I can't have it because I'm gluten intolerant. And we'd be at an event where they're eating pizza, or we'd be in an Italian restaurant and they're eating pasta. And I'm just like, I just can't keep having this conversation.
Last week we were talking to our winemaker friend Fa about the about the what was it, the sulfite conversation, you know, somebody's like chewing on some dried fruit and eating some cheese, saying they can't have sulfites in their wines because it gets them a headache. So yeah, we feel you over here, man.
Yeah.
Jason, what can you tell us about this bourbon cream that I've got in my glass right here?
Yeah, so the bourbon cream was really a happy accident. So I started the company in 2012, and about 6 months in, my father retired. And there'd been no intentions of him joining the business, but he kind of failed spectacularly at retirement. So he started working for me a couple days a week. And in the middle of the week, if we weren't busy, we didn't have a bartender on. And so sometimes he'd end up talking to the customers, which is always dangerous because my dad's a mechanical engineer. He's a very literal person. And so people would say, well, what do you like to drink? And he'd be like, oh, Chardonnay. And I'm like, Dad, they're not trying to get to know you. They're looking for a recommendation of what we make here. And so finally, you know, after several of those conversations, he goes, well, I don't drink gin and I don't drink whiskey. But if you made something like an Irish cream, I could probably get behind that. So I had no intention of following up on this, but I'm at a New York State Farm Bureau meeting because as a grain to glass distillery, we're fairly involved in New York State farm politics. And this guy walks up to me and goes, have you ever made Bailey's? And I was like, well, sir, Bailey's is a brand, and I think that would break a few laws. He goes, fine. Have you ever made something like Bailey's? I was like, no, but I could get behind that idea. And he goes, I just bought this machine from Europe, and they tell me you can make Bailey's on it. So if you want to bring your alcohol down to my dairy, let's give this a shot, see what happens. A few weeks later, we cranked out a test batch, 1,500 bottles. And at the time, I mean, we're tiny. We're making like 1,000 bottles a month. This is going to last us all winter. It's great. Well, 3 weeks later, we were making 1,500 more. And we now actually bring the cream in 5,000 gallons at a time. And we convert the distillery over to dairy for about a month, make 25,000 bottles, and then go back to making our bourbon and gin. So it has just run away with itself, all because my father likes to drink Chardonnay.
That's freaking awesome.
Yep.
That is so awesome.
Yeah.
And
so,
it is. Go ahead.
So that's how it came to be from an actual production standpoint. It's just ultra pasteurized cream, the same stuff they put in the little cups at the diners so it doesn't spoil. A little bit of caramel coloring, burnt sugar, so that it's got a little bit of darkness to it. Our bourbon and a touch of sugar. Those 4 ingredients are all you need. We don't have to put any preservatives or anticoagulants or any of the crazy stuff that's needed to bring Irish cream over across the Atlantic. If we were to ship our stuff to Europe, I guess we would, but we're not in any hurry to do that. So
that must be part of why it's so damn good.
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah, it's like the difference between like fresh baked bread at like a country bakery and don't get me wrong, and the sliced stuff that you get in the supermarket. It's just very different.
Yeah, this is really good. This is really good stuff.
It has been affectionately called liquid crack.
I could see why.
TTB did not go for adding that to the label.
No, really? TTB is a little sticky about some of that.
The government's always getting in the way of everything. That'll be perfect.
Yeah.
All right, John, bourbon.
So, I got to be honest with you, Jason. The first time I got this, I cracked it open, and it was right in the brewery, and it was, it was like 11 o'clock in the morning, and I tasted it, and I thought it was too sweet. But now it's been open for a month, and I've had a couple of tastes since that time.
Yep.
And what comes across to me is that, and dude, every time I take a sip of this stuff, I just stick my nose in there. I'm like, I hit every single note, and that's the corn, the wheat, the rye, and the malted barley comes through on the nose.
Yep.
Which is it. And the first thing, it doesn't matter what you're drinking. Don't open it up the minute you get it from the FedEx guy. Just don't. You're not doing the person who's spent a lot of really cool time making it, and all the people that got the corn, the rye, the wheat, and the barley to that person in the first place. And you got to take time. And case in point, we made our Mexican lager at Lizard Tail for the first time on the big system. We did 20 barrels, and you can't. When we moved it over, it completely fermented. We moved it over into the bright tank to cold crash for weeks and weeks and weeks at a time. And just now, a week later, we're starting to get the flavors come through. So letting flavors settle regardless is really important. And the corn's way up front. The rye's right behind it. The wheat's got a little bit of sweetness. And then the malted barley is a really balancing thing on the very end of this.
And again, similar
so
to
I
the
like
gin,
it way better than the first time I opened it up at the brewery. Way better.
There's something about once that bottle breathes a little bit.
Yeah, you got to let it oxidize a little bit. The bourbon cream, before the show we were talking about, this is like the danger thing, the crack that my wife has been like hitting on since I brought it home, and it's been in the refrigerator. And the balance on that is just really super cool. But I've got the silver bullet. Who was it? Scott Baker that we had on the show a couple of weeks ago from Australia. And it's Mr. Black's cold brew coffee liqueur. And if you mix this stuff up 50-50 with the bourbon cream, you're going to make $1 billion, dude.
So we've actually done some neat collaborations with Mr. Black. I personally like one part coffee or 2 parts bourbon cream is how I do it, but it is delicious, especially with their cold brew.
Dangerous stuff.
So Mr. Black gave you $1 million to do that, right, Jason?
No, $1 billion.
$1 billion.
So Jason, like I gotta say, like similar to the gin, where like on the nose, like that, with a lot of bourbons, if you take a big old sniff of it, you're gonna lose some nose hairs from kind of that alcohol burn, and it's not here in this.
Really smooth.
And
really smooth.
It's like shocking how for 84 proof, like how smooth of a drink this is. No ice, no water, no nothing. And it's just a smooth, silky, delicious taste of bourbon.
And if you've got good, clean fermentation and good, clean distillation, you can do really great stuff in a short amount of time.
But and similar to the gin, there's a weight to this as well. Is it the same reasoning behind the gin, or?
Yep. Yeah. It's that house yeast and that house style for us, where it just brings over a bit of heft across the double pot distillation. So it's just sort of a house style that runs across all of our spirits.
It's just wild having the weight that you have to these drinks. It's remarkable. It's really cool.
It's nice to see these balances that we're getting with these craft distilleries that are not blasting your sinuses or your nose hairs or the upper part of your palate, quite frankly, when you're sipping these things, when it's really just this intake of flavors that is aromatizing through your palate, but not sanitizing it because of the alcohol,
Jeff, how's your martini?
It is delicious. And I got to tell you something. Living in Gilroy, California, it is difficult to find a jar of olives in my fair city that is not garlic stuff. And so I will say this, though. The gin just told the garlic to take a fucking seat because it's so beautiful. This is one of those few exceptions where you could have a little garlic in there and it's gonna round it out. And so yeah, I'm a big fan of this as a martini, but honestly, so surprised. And here's the thing. I mean, the trick is with like a gin martini, everybody, it's basically a straight like shot of gin. But I really enjoyed it neat, like really close to room temperature. I almost feel, and I know this sounds weird, I almost feel like my martini is a little bit too cold. And I'm excited to let it kind of grow back up to room temperature a little bit as I sip this. This martini right here is going to last me the next 2 days.
Awesome.
Oh,
All
and
right.
sorry, a pinky for the peeps.
Oh, there you go. I'll have one with my old fashioned as well. Awesome. Okay, so great stuff, Jason. Like right off the bat, this is some delicious product. Outside of the bourbon cream, the 4-grain bourbon, the citrus forward gin, what are some of the other products that you have available?
So we make a lilac gin. Rochester is the flower city. We have a huge lilac festival every May. It's our single biggest seasonal, over 8,000 bottles delivered this year to over 800 accounts, all on the same day, which is logistical fun. We make a loganberry gin for the Buffalo market, where they just love loganberries. But as we were talking about earlier, it's just very, very Buffalo and Niagara County. And by the time you get to Rochester, 45-minute east, nobody's ever heard of it. We do a barrel reserve gin, which is our citrus forward gin in our ex-bourbon barrels for about 2 years. We do an Empire rye whiskey. So 96% rye, 4% malted barley, aged 2 years in 30-gallon barrels at right about 100 proof. So the way they would have done it prior to prohibition out this way. We do an all malt whiskey only 1 day a year because we have to brew it at the brewery next door and literally pump it through the parking lot. Get it over to it. So that's called Black Luck. We actually we make it exclusively for restaurant Good Luck in Rochester, New York, to pay a debt. So you know the trouble you can get yourselves into when you run into the story, you pay off your debts and whiskey. We do a single barrel cask strength port finish bourbon, straight bourbon. So 2 years in bourbon barrels, 3 to 6 years in port barrels. So unlike other folks that are just doing a couple weeks, we actually like a couple years in our secondary finishing barrels. It's deep stone fruit and ruby red, and comes out about 128 proof, and it's just a big old bourbon. And then we do single barrels and cask strength bourbon and rye, and a bunch of just variations on that. There's always something new coming out of Black Button, whether it's a tasting room exclusive or something we just do in a specific area in New York. We're kind of fortunate in New York. We self-distribute, so we can work directly with those liquor stores and do really small runs and still have it work. But then outside of New York, we work with our distributors. It's a little harder to get new items in. So these 3 are the only 3 that have gone national for us.
Okay. Awesome. That's quite the lineup. And if people are interested, they can visit blackbuttondistilling.com and they are able to order there, correct?
Yeah. So with the laws changing this past year, we've got a great direct-to-consumer partner. If you go to blackbuttondistilling.com, our website connects you right to them. And you can literally have these and most of our other products delivered right to your front door. And they've now got flat fee shipping. So you buy a whole case, you're really making out.
You're making money almost. You're almost making money out of it. I mean
it is surprisingly competitive compared to where it was a few years ago, where it was very difficult to have things shipped out of state.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so folks, be sure to check that out. We're going to take a small break here to get our minds a pumping with a little bit we like to call
wine, beer, spirit, or pop culture reference. I'm going to go around the horn, ask these three yahoos a question, give them a term, actually. They're going to take a stab at it, and we'll see who gets points. You know, it's kind of like Drew Carey and Whose Line Is It Anyway? Very odd that I saw Colin Mockery on a British murder mystery last night. But anyway, I digress.
You have been all show. So
I've been very much all show.
Whose Line Is It Anyway? It's a great show to watch when you're like sick and depressed and you can't change the channel because you don't have the will to find the remote control.
Carry on, John.
I'd rather watch nothing, but I'm too weak to turn it off. Whose line is it anyway?
Who are you?
Carry
on.
The
most garbage of shows.
It's
the Kevin Smith of TV shows.
I'm about to mute you, Jeff Solomon, so stop. John,
this week's term is whirlflock. Whirlflock. All right. I'm going to go with
What?
All right.
It's John, one of those things where the defendant whirlflocked his roommate, and now we're hearing for it.
I looked it up. We've never used this term on the show before.
No. So, John Ruyak,
yes,
if you don't mind, could you please spell rural flock for us?
WHIRL.
Oh.
FLOC.
Oh, one word?
One word. No hyphens, no umlauts, no accents.
Okay.
No colons, semicolons, any of that shit.
Got it. Okay.
Eccles, you go first.
Yeah, for sure. Whirlflock. It's funny because sometimes John's a bit of a foreshadower. He likes he likes to let you know what's coming. So whirlflock is going to be a beer term, and I'm going to go ahead and consider mead to be a beer term. And this is going to be something because John was just brewing mead this week. He's making mead this week. This is going to be some kind of transport flap or mechanism that's going to transfer some honey or something along the lines of making mead. This is going to be some kind of device that is used in the making of mead.
Yeah. All right. Jason, what do you think?
Shut up.
I assume that this is a crime in the state of California, punishable by no less than 3 years in a county jail.
Okay,
so I guess you're saying it's a pop culture reference.
I guess that's
a pop culture reference. So this is funny. So we were sitting around the other day, and Augie, our chef, comes up to us, and he brings up a can of seltzer water. Because we don't drink during work hours. We drink when work hours are over. And it's a La Croix Pamplemousse. And he says, and he's very, very Hispanic. And he's like, John, what does this mean? I said, Pamplemousse. And my assistant brewer pipes in, that'll get you arrested in Canada. He's like, what? I said, it means grapefruit, you asshole. It's anyway.
Whirlflock.
Whirlflock.
Going back to the spelling, capital W?
Not necessarily.
There's no like R with a circle around it at the end?
No.
Oh, that might be okay. Because I was thinking that this was some sort of like brand name for an ingredient that you use in the brewing process that's kind of like a fining agent that you put in at some point, like right before or right after the boil or something like that. That might be called like proto flock or something. So Whirl Flock, I believe, is actually the sixth album from Led Zeppelin. It's a pop culture reference. Final answer.
I thought you were going to say flock.
That would be physical graffiti, by the way, and it's not Whirl Flock. And if you had stuck with your first answer, which is an ingredient that goes after the boil, you would have won, Solomon, but you lost because you couldn't guess that.
Ah, God. Okay. I mean,
Whirl Flock. It's a beer reference.
Okay. I would have never known that that's what that was.
It's actually made from seaweed, and it's a vegan ingredient. So you can use that as a kettle fining and keep your beer in a vegan consideration.
There you go.
Brad said
it's a vegan oyster stout. You use the Whirl Flock.
Yeah, whatever.
Brad said it sounded like some kind of fungus, so he was going to say a beer term. Jim just said
it's cool stuff. It's really cool stuff. And the whole chemistry of the thing is like it's a positively charged seaweed thing, and it attracts the negatively charged proteins that are in the beer, and they all fall into this big giant glob of shit in the bottom of the pot. It's gross but cool.
Yeah, it's this big shit that your beer takes.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.
Okay. Can we move on to interviewing
So Jason, how much Whirl Flock do you put your
So fun fact, we have on-grain distillation, so the shit just stays right in there through the whole process. That's what gives it the weight.
That's the viscosity.
So Jason Barrett from Black Button Distilling. I love the name. I love the story behind it. So could you tell our listeners how you came up with the name Black Button Distilling?
Yeah. So my family's actually been making buttons here in Rochester, New York since 1922. And my mother still runs the button company this is all named after. There was one problem passing it on to the next generation. I'm completely colorblind, which we discovered when I was a young child. So the joke when I was a kid is if I took over the factory, we'd have to switch to only making black buttons. So I decided I would make some black buttons, but of the liquid variety instead.
There you go.
So plus it makes a neat logo.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it does. I
love the logo. It's nuts. Yeah. And I like the story too.
Yeah. No, it ties back to a nice piece of Rochester history. And for folks that are in our hometown, the button factory actually sits right off of one of the big main streets. We haven't owned the building since the 50s, but everybody knows where the button factory was. So, and actually a lot of people have family members that worked there.
Oh, nice.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And you're back in that same town now, right?
Yeah. We're only about a half a mile up East Main Street from where the button factory was. I mean, literally, if you'd walked in there in 1922, you would have found my great-grandfather as the shop foreman, my great-grandmother running one of the machines. It was the largest button factory on the planet at the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. So colorblind Jason Barrett went off to college, gets a poli-sci major. You go to DC and work on Capitol Hill. You spend time in sales. You work for a check company for a while.
Yeah.
What on earth made you decide to say, forget all that high society, high glam. I'm going to go get dirty and distill?
Well, so it was funny, actually. I was a top performer at the accounting company, and they brought us all up to the corporate headquarters, and you got to meet with all these senior people, and you go and visit like the VP of sales office, and they go, if you work hard for the next 20 years, this could be your office. And I literally look around and I'm like, I don't want to fucking do this. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on.
You are.
I'll go for it.
But yeah, I really like they really like shattered. Like if they just left me alone, if I had never been inducted into the Rising Star program, I'd probably still work there. But they showed me my future, and I didn't like it. So I started looking around. I've been a home brewer for 7 years. I'd won some awards. Craft beer was just getting started in DC. We had maybe half a dozen breweries, many of which were run by friends of mine. And so originally I was going to open a brewery, and I'd saved up some money, and I renovated a house and made a little money off of that. And as I got into the business plan, I almost ended up buying this brewery down in North Carolina, and it didn't end up working out. And part of the problem was they didn't make any money all winter, but their original business plan had been to be a brewery and distillery where they'd make spirits all winter because they would last till the summer, and then they'd make beer all summer, and they'd sell both all summer. And they were going to need a distillery component to save the brewery. Well, as I'm looking at it, I'm realizing there was actually, kind of made more sense to make spirits from an economics perspective for what I wanted to do. So, did the perfectly reasonable thing, quit my job, sold my house, left the fiance, and moved to the West Coast for a while. Worked at Dry Fly Distilling in Spokane, Washington. And after a while, got a little homesick, decided I wanted to be back in my hometown of Rochester, New York. There were no distilleries, so started one.
That's amazing. Was there any regulatory hoops that prevented there from being a distillery that you had to overcome, or was it just nobody had done it?
Nobody had done it, and actually New York at the time had some of the more favorable laws. If you were a farm distillery, which was already something I was interested in, which in New York requires 75% New York grown ingredients. We're at about 95 at this point. But the license was only $1,500 a year instead of $50,000. Wow. So that helped when you're pinching every penny. And then we're located right next to the public market. So I go before the zoning board, and they're like, well, if you want to put a distillery in the public market, you're going to have a tasting room. It's the only way we'll allow it. And I'm like, yep.
Okay.
That's what
good.
we want.
Thank you.
Right. They're like, it'll have to be open every week. I'm like, yeah, sure. That's how we're going to pay our bills.
Come on.
So that luckily worked out from a zoning perspective. We actually didn't find out that we needed a special water permit till 2 weeks after we opened. So luckily we qualified for that, because that would have been a real bummer. But yeah, no, it all just worked out. But lot of 17 licenses to legally operate the facility, and none of them have anything to do with how much methanol you put in the product. All about taxes.
It's taxes and affluent and what's going down the drain and what's not going down the drain and all these other crazy ass shit things.
Yep.
That had to. Did people think you were crazy?
Oh yeah.
When you sold everything and said, "I'm going to move across
Mom and Dad especially.
Mom and Dad were very supportive. What I did not realize until about 5 years in was they were being so supportive because they figured the banks would just turn me down, so they didn't have to be the ones to tell me this was ridiculous. And then I went out and pitched 17 banks, and 2 of them said yes. And so I go back to my parents and I'm like, hey, I got a loan. So I'm not only going to quit my job and move into your basement, but I'm going to be $250,000 in debt. And at that point, we were a little too far along for them to be like, you're 24 years old. You're good. Who would in their right mind give you $250,000 to go make whiskey for a living when you've never done it commercially?
That is
it was so pretty funny. And they have been very, very supportive. But
it's all about markets. It's about
what year was that?
That was in 2012.
Okay. All right.
And for what it's worth, I don't know that they normally would go for that, but it was I'd had training as a business consultant and as an accountant, so The business plan was very tight. A lot of the metrics have held true, other than we've grown faster than I projected, but a lot of our ratios and everything have remained true. And, and our banker was pretty upfront. You're like, listen, we'll lend on the equipment. You've got to pay for everything else. Because quite frankly, if you go under, we're going to auction the equipment off, and that'll be that. But yeah, I mean, with the help of an SBA loan, we bought the first still, and through just dogged, 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, it's amazing what you can get done when sleep becomes an option.
and when
it's not an option, it's a luxury.
Yes.
And we're just hyper focused on making something happen.
Yeah.
Jeff Solomon.
I'd imagine being thrown into this pressure cooker of, well, I guess I'm going to have to be successful here. I'd imagine that there's also this massive evolution in terms of your like palate and your draw to like certain types of distilled spirits. Are there certain types of spirits that you didn't even consider when you were younger that you've just become this massive fan of through this process?
So the interesting irony that my friends from college or high school find hysterical is that I really did not drink much before getting into this professionally. I was always just very interested in the category. But I was the guy going to a college kegger with my own 6-pack of craft beer that I, was then not drinking from the red Solo cups, because if I was going to drink, I was going to drink good stuff. I've definitely I've been exposed to a lot of really interesting things. The one that probably surprises me the most for your question is Portuga style mezcal, because I don't really like tequila and I don't drink much mezcal. But Portuga style mezcal with the fruits and the fact that they pull a lot of the methanol out because of the meat hanging in the still. I was with a sales rep for one of our distributors. They're showing this account, these things. I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. I got to get a bottle and take it home with me. And he goes, oh, I can get you one from the will call when we get back. It's $700 wholesale. And I was like, wow. This was delicious. I'm glad I got to try a $700 bottle of mezcal. I'll get back to you on that.
Wow.
Yeah, that's probably been the biggest surprise. More recently, I've really been getting into Irish whiskey, which obviously, I honeymooned in Ireland, so I really kind of started at that point, and I just really love some of the softer, especially if I've had a couple of bourbons, kind of finishing out the night with some Irish whiskeys becomes sort of a thing. And then I've been getting into aged rums the last few years, stuff that's 20, 23 years old, usually aged in ex-bourbon casks, which probably explains why I like it so much. So, but honestly, 90% of what I drink is probably bourbon, and 90% of what's left is probably gin. So I'm a pretty easy guy. I drink them both straight. I luckily have a great team that makes fancy cocktails out of them, and I try to memorize a few of those so I don't sound silly when people ask me cocktail things. But to me, I just like spirits on the rocks or straight up.
Very cool. So I'm wondering when you're going to start like hanging some meat up around the...
So I have discussed with my staff doing a Portuga style bourbon. And actually, we have some good friends that run El Silencio mezcal, and we were talking about kind of doing this with them as a collaboration. They weren't huge proponents of that idea. There were some cultural appropriation questions. So at the moment, we have not done that. I've been trying to find out how would we do it in a respectful manner is the question. I also asked the question. I know they use chicken down there, but like I was thinking like we do it with like a whole raw turkey.
Yeah.
Very like Thanksgiving, Americana.
Oh, I can see that.
Yeah.
I'm getting kind of fired up. Guys, I'm gonna hang some like bacon strips in my closet and do a little practice.
There you go.
You know, we've been talking about you adding
prosciutto, whatever.
We've been talking about you adding some life to your background. There you go. Hang some meat in your bedroom.
Meats in the guest room where you guys might be staying in a couple months. So
John Riek.
enjoy that.
So you said, grain to glass and things are 95%. Are you working with single growers for your corn, wheat, rye, and barley malts?
So we are working with a single grower. Although I guess it's a father and son team, so I guess it's sort of a twofer.
Nice.
Edgewood Farms in Groveland, New York. They've got 1,700 acres. They've got 50 head of beef cattle. They grow corn, wheat, rye, and malting barley specifically for us. We commit to those fields before they ever put it in the ground. We tend to grow about half of it on their northern slopes, which those fields directly overlook Canisius Lake and have a really neat microclimate. And then they've got fields down in the Sparta Valley, which is just the other side of the mountain ridge.
Is that Canisius Lake, like Canisius College in Buffalo?
Spelled the same way, but they're about an hour apart.
All right.
Yep.
Good basketball program at Canisius.
Yep. But we tend to split about half and half. And then at the end of the season, we'll do protein counts and moisture levels and all of that stuff. And then usually we'll pick one of the two field sets and sell the other one back to them for cattle feed. And then all of our spent grain goes back to them for cattle feed as well.
Oh, cool.
The malting barley goes to a malt house that's about halfway between us and the farm, where they floor malt it, old school, clean it, desprout it. So we get very, very clean, high enzymatic 2-row barley for our conversions. And it's all done within a 45-minute range. All of our cream comes from a single dairy. All of our apple products for the various apple brandies and things we make come from a single orchard. We like finding folks that think about things kind of the same way we do, where you're really looking to just show off what the agricultural opportunity in New York can be. So
that's so cool because I don't want to. I mean, that's right up the alley for us. I mean, that's so fresh. I mean, we have for 90% of our product, we switched over to proximity malt, which is an hour and a half north of us.
That's
not New Mexico, but just over the line in Colorado, where they grow heirloom barley.
Yep.
And they malt it and ship it to us within 2 weeks of malting, which is just nuts for the freshness. When you consider the other stuff that you get from RAR or Germany that's a year old or 6 months old. So just the freshness aspect of that that's so cool for you, Jason. That's really neat that you're able to do that. Yeah,
and they've just all made great partners that again are really committed to delivering the highest quality grains, the highest quality malts, and that quality in the ingredients really shows through in the final product.
And to be able to know those people personally is, I'm sure, very satisfying. Yep.
Yeah, and we just get to learn a lot of neat things. When do they plant? When do we harvest? What goes on with the sun and the water and the wind? And what are the challenges? I mean, we had an issue 3 years back. We were having a great year for rye. We were getting rain at night, but sunny days. We were getting these tall stacks. The rye looks big and plump, and they're going to harvest it in 2 days. And then this freak windstorm comes through and just blows all the rye, like 90% of the rye crop, like blows over. Oh, no. And we use a heritage style Danko rye. So it's not like I can just go buy it somewhere else. So the farmer, I mean, you can't use it for human consumption at that point. It's on the ground. It's got to be used for animal feed. We've got, literally like 10% of what we thought we needed for the year. And now, what do you make, and where do you, try to find a little bit else, and it was just a really interesting challenge that you wouldn't have if you were working with some mega producer. But at the same time, that's how you get the really quality specialty stuff that then makes the product special. So we found various ways, and they actually did a winter crop of rye, which they don't normally do for us. And we did end up making it work. But we had we kind of usually flip flop, we're making gin, then we're making bourbon, then we're making gin. And that year we had to make all of our gin all spring. We were waiting for the rye to come in so we could make our bourbon in the fall. It made for a really weird.
So they put some rye seed in the ground around July to harvest it in October and in November. Then I would imagine.
Normally, yes, normally we do fall rye.
Wow, that's insane. That's the throes of nature. That's just crazy. It just does my heart good.
Yes. It just makes me really wish we had harvested it 3 days earlier.
Right.
That you're a farmer too, yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, Jason, you're saying 95% of your stuff all comes from New York, local to you. Did I see that your barrels also come from our local?
So about half of our barrels come from Adirondack Cooperage, which is up in Remsen, New York. So they're using Missouri white oak right now. But they're assembling them here in New York, and we get a custom char on it. What's really crazy is that I bought 19 acres south of the city that has a large white oak stand on it, and we are actually harvesting our own trees, converting them into staves. 2 years from now, we'll have barrels, and 5 years after that, we'll have bourbon aged in New York white oak from my very farm.
Oh,
so,
that's
wow.
That is sick.
But it'll only probably be about 10% of what we make.
Yeah.
You ever seen those wood misers, those portable sawmills?
Mm-hmm.
We're literally cutting the staves on that. Because you have to quarter saw it, which means you have to turn the log every time you cut it. And every sawmill I went to was no.
You can't do that.
Wow.
We're not doing this for you. How much do you want to pay for that?
So I finally found a guy that has one of these trailer mounted bandsaws. And luckily, he just charges by the day. So he sets up in my field. We quarter saw as much as we get. It's still the most expensive barrel there's probably been, ever made in New York. But there's no stave industry up here. They don't. Literally, we're pulling these trees out with Amish draft horses because nobody does this. And I'm starting to understand why. But I'm really looking forward to it. Because, again, those trees grew in our conditions. The staves aged in our conditions with our microflora getting into those pores. They're going to be assembled just 2 hours north of here and come back and have 100% New York grain put in them. It's going to be a really fun day when that all comes together.
Wow. I can't. I'm so I have a real deep appreciation for how that's going to feel for you when that happens. So, what kind of char are you putting on these barrels?
So it's probably right about a 3.5. But what's interesting for us, we found that if you do basically a triple long toast, 3 times as long toasting, you end up with a much deeper caramelized layer, and then you can do the char really quick because the wood's already really quite hot.
Right.
They have this big, beautiful machine that has all these lasers that's really monitoring the wood temperature at 6 different points in the barrel simultaneously. And then with a propane lance, they're adjusting exactly how deep it is. So it worked out really well. But it took a lot of development with Adirondack Cooperage to plug in exactly what we wanted ours to taste like.
Such an art form.
Jason,
that's just wow.
I have got to ask, because I believe you mentioned earlier, you have some single barrel bourbons that you release already, and here I am just looking at this gin where it almost looks like maybe I have a handwritten batch number on the front. I've got to ask though, Jason.
Yeah.
do you have, like, in the lineup right now, a favorite barrel?
Ooh. There are a couple of barrels that we are holding back for special occasions, as well as some that were put down for special occasions. So my wife and I had a beautiful baby girl back in August, and we laid down 20 barrels the week that she was born, and those have been sealed. And we'll see whether we make it all the way to her 21st birthday. But those are going to go for a while. Fun. Do you want something fun though? That handwritten number on your batch for the first 7 years, we actually hand wrote all of those. But that, and I'm glad you showed it because that made me able to confirm it. That was actually printed by a computer. But the actual numbers, and you'll notice the 2 on these two are identical.
Yeah.
Those numbers, we had Hewlett Packard make a custom font from my grandfather's handwriting.
No,
that is.
And he passed 10 years before I opened the distillery, but it was working with him side by side in the button factory that got me interested in making something rather than just being in an office. So we took old button labels, pieces of his handwriting, and they created us a custom font. And then there's a print head on our label printer, and it's his handwriting on every bottle.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
That is so
But in the
cool.
best way.
I love this, like, homage to the past. I know, Eccles, I know I keep cutting you off. This is so important. I have to get this in for the fans, Jeff Eccles.
We have fans.
We have like a tens of fans. And what they're waiting for is this. So knowing that there are some single barrels in the full, knowing that you've got some that are literally being grown right now, I'm not certain if you've got like a spirit club going on, and maybe you can talk about that in a little bit if you do. However, isn't now the perfect time to release the Black Button Distilling NFT where people get to own their own individual barrels?
I mean, I was actually just talking to somebody about that this past weekend. If you're looking to invest in Black Button NFTs, email us at cheers@blackbuttondistilling.com, and I will find a way to make that happen. I always joke I am far too broke to turn away good money. We'll find a way.
like that would be a really good use of.
I think it'd be awesome. You're
technology.
talking to somebody who spent too much money on a LeBron James 3-pointer this morning. So
I was just asking my brother-in-law like how this all works. He's a software developer, and again, luckily I'm the very hands-on guy. He's the very computer guy. But it's funny how little I know about this stuff, because I was like, would we have our own Bitcoin? Like, how does that work? He's like, no. You'd have your own like NFT. I'm like, oh, do you buy NFTs with Bitcoin?
So
like,
what's more valuable? A LeBron James 3-pointer or a Zdeno Chara 109-mile-an-hour slap shot for a goal?
I mean, what would be more valuable is owning my own barrel at Black Button Distilling.
Well, we definitely actually do that. We have about 28 barrels that are privately owned.
Oh, nice.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yep, and a couple of them are broken down into fractions. I got to see if that's still on the website. It's been a crazy year.
I think it is.
I think it is too. But yeah, I mean, and we have some neat things. I mean, some people, they come and they want to taste barrels that are done. Other people, they want to put a barrel down at their wedding or birth of a kid or some major thing, and they want to just let it ride. And they come in and check on it every couple of years, and we taste it, and they tell us when they want us to bottle it, or we'll just let it go.
There you go.
So I see it now, the exclusive We Like Drinking twerking next to a Black Button Distilling barrel. it will go for all of the ETH, whatever that is.
Ethereum. Jason, like I want to go back to, because I'm fascinated by this fact that you're going to have New York barrels soon. When have you thought through that process? Are those going to be single barrel bottles, or do you think you're going to blend those in with the mass 4-grain bourbon?
So I definitely don't think we would end up blending it into the mass 4-grain one.
Yeah.
Whether they can, I would imagine we would end up with some as single barrels and some as a blend of New York barrels. Because the struggle with barrels, I mean, like 98% of them, when we go to taste, have a flaw. Some have two.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a great nose, but no back palate. Or it's a little rough around the edges, but it has a great mid palate. So we're constantly taking notes on those, and it's the mixing of 80 to 100 barrels that then gives you a great, complex, diverse, hitting on all notes blend. But about 1 out of every 50 barrels has everything we're looking for. Yeah. It's got the taste, the mouthfeel, the nose, the mid palate, the back palate. And so those we pull out as single barrels. I would imagine the New York barrels will go the same way, where a few will be single barrel quality, but most will need to be blended together. But we will do them as just a New York section, because the other part actually we hadn't talked about, we're really going all in on this 100% New York. We're working with Rochester Institute of Technology to actually isolate our own alcohol tolerant yeast for that. So it'll be a different yeast from what we normally use. And as John would tell you, I mean, yeast is a huge component of flavor in any alcoholic product. So it will be very different from our traditional 4-grain. There's even some discussion, depending on how those yeast trials go, we may actually modify it'll still be a bourbon, but we may modify the actual 4-grain recipe to try to better fit that yeast. And it'll be a really unique product. So you won't be able to blend it with the traditional label 4-grain.
I mean, I really didn't think you would, but I had to ask the question. And then, John, I know you want to. I know you.
No, that's just the thing. I just would expand on that. Is that where you generally see is about 1 out of 50 or 1 out of 100 is that special out of a lot of barrels? Is that what you would expect?
Yeah, we run pretty consistently 1 out of 50.
Okay.
But we also have a very high, like, if it's not super special, super unique, it's not a single barrel for us.
So we've talked, I mean, we've had Four Roses on, we've had some other folks on where they have these single barrel selects and these other things. So what we're talking about is these, I mean, really a 2%.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen folks do it as high as 15%. And I guess at that point, they're just taking, kind of a data cut. This is the top 10 or 15% of what we make. But for us, the single barrels really have to be a knock it out of the park. Because again, they tend to go to either, super special stores, whiskey groups, or we're selling them our own tasting room. And I'm aware that our whiskey, we're putting out 3.5 to 4-year-old whiskey and competing with 14 and 15-year-old barrels. We've got to really put our best foot forward every day, but especially if we're going to say that it's our special one.
Yeah. Is there any way to narrow that down? Are there metrics that you can use to focus that into something that's going to be a little bit more consistent? I get it. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, as a small brewer, and yeah, we're going from 350 barrels a year to 2,000 barrels a year, and that's not, in the scheme of things, it's a huge jump for us.
Yep.
But in the scheme of things, it's really not. And part of the charm of things is throwing something out that is special relative to that particular brew. And that's cool. but it doesn't play well against the consistency of your product. So what I'm saying is, how do you see a balance there? Do you see a
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's just single barrels to us have to be really unique and something that is special and something that is that if a consumer really likes this barrel, they probably want to go out and get a few more bottles from that barrel. This is never going to happen again. It can't just be good. It's got to be great. And for us, that only seems to happen about 2% of the time. We will run into certain scenarios where we'll come across 5 or 6 of them in a row. That's rare. It usually only happens like once a year. But if and oftentimes that's just that you hit the right combination of that distilling day, that particular barrel production lot, and a lot of it even has to do with where they age in the warehouse. I mean, we have 2 whiskey warehouses. One is metal, and one is brick. And the brick warehouse is our older warehouse. And when we started laying down right next to this big garage door. And every day, 10 times a day, we're in and out of that garage door. And 90-degree heat in the summer and -10 in the winter. And the barrels that were right next to that door, the first like 6 in that row, aged beautifully. But you go a little further down that row towards the corner of the building, literally laid down the same day from the same production batch. Those barrels that were just 20 feet into the corner where we don't actually have good airflow, we actually had to move them. They were at 3.5 years old. They were nowhere near ready because here in the back corner without enough airflow, they hadn't really developed. And yet not 20 feet away, we literally went like 4 for 6 single barrels right in a row, which again, we almost never see.
That's the $600 bottle of whiskey right there, dude. I get it. I mean, that's the
How you doing there,
that's
John?
that's the capriciousness. It's the capriciousness of producing things on a consistent basis. It's that specialness of it.
Well, and how do you have that
neat.
consistency while also holding out the craft part? And one of the ways that I've put that to people, one of my favorite meals at one of my favorite restaurants, they do this great chicken parmesan. But every time the chicken's a little different, the house-made marinara's a touch different. Did they leave it on the grill a little longer? Was there a little more oil in the pan? Don't get me wrong, it's always fantastic, but it always moves around just a touch.
Right.
Whereas if you go to Applebee's, I mean, it's the same.
Yeah.
It is always the same. Never great, but it is exactly the same.
Always consistent.
Right. And so we take more of that family restaurant approach where we've got a quality standard to hold. We're never going to let it out if it doesn't meet that. But batch to batch, bottle to bottle, barrel to barrel, you're going to see some movement. Because again, did the distiller crank it just a half a degree farther? Was the atmospheric pressure rising or falling that day? Did we make it in January or July? These things.
Was Jason a little bit happy with the garage door opener?
When he says something about barometric pressure on those days, and that has a big effect on evaporation content.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Especially when you're at altitude like we are here in Albuquerque, and all of a sudden it's low pressure and you're boiling off another 1/4 of a barrel per hour. That's a big deal. It's a big deal.
We actually can't get the still to balance for vodka if the pressure is falling too fast. So we have several barometers right in the building, and if they're moving fast enough, we just call it and come back the next day, and the still will run fine the next day. But if that storm front's coming in off Lake Erie and the pressure's dropping fast enough, you're literally causing a vacuum out of the still, and you can't make vodka that day.
That's cool stuff. That's cool stuff. That's playing your instrument.
Okay. One last question, guys, because we're starting to run long.
I'm done.
Thank you, John. Jeff.
Okay, I just have to ask, growing up around buttons, I have this like flashback to my childhood, to this story from a book called Frog and Toad Are Friends. And they had this like a frog and a toad that were like best friends. And they had this whole story about how Toad lost one of his buttons. And it was just the most heartbreaking tale of all time. And I just need to know, do you have a copy of that book in the distillery?
I have never heard of this story.
Oh man, Toad was so pissed. The frog's like, here, dude, I found this button. And Toad's like, that button has 2 holes. My button has 4. What the fuck's your problem? I asked for a crypto punk and you bring me V friends. I don't need this shit.
Jason, I told you, like, things can get a little off the rails on this show.
It happens. So I got to admit, I'm not up on that one. But in college, a young lady that I was interested in broke a button on her coat, and I was able to get her a replacement button. And she was so thankful. She said, "What can I do to thank you?" And I said, "You can have dinner with me." And she did. I married somebody else, but it was a good dinner.
He's a smooth operator.
So Solomon,
Yes.
there's a song on Cream's album Wheels of Fire. It's called Pressed Rat and Warthog that you should listen to regarding your question.
Jason Barrett, are there any new products that you're working on that you haven't shared with us yet that you could share with us that aren't like, you can't tell us about or anything like that?
We're a pretty open book. I mean, people always ask if they can take pictures and everything. We're pretty open. I mean, we just laid down. So I was telling you earlier, we have our port finish.
Yes.
Single barrel strength bourbon. We've just laid down some brethren for that. We have bourbon that's going to finish in rum casks for 2 or 3 years. Bourbon that is going to finish in tequila casks for 2 or 3 years. And then bourbon that is going to finish in apple brandy casks for 2 or 3 years. So we are unfortunately a little ways away.
Yeah.
But that is one option. The other interesting thing, back to Jeff's question earlier about NFTs, I have found a cooperage in Europe that is willing to make bourbon barrels that are 150 gallons. So 3 times the size of a normal bourbon barrel. These things are massive.
Go on.
And they make them by hand. They have to hand furnish them. They're very expensive. And then you have to ship them over. But I want to buy 4 of these. And I want to fill them all with bourbon on the same day. And I want to have one say, 2027, and another say 2032, and another 2037, another 2042. And then I want to sell NFTs where the NFT is worth 1 bottle from each barrel. And you can come back in 5, 10, 15, and 20 years and collect on your bottle that'll age right out in front of what should be our new distillery. So I think that's about a year out. But these barrels are massive. And I think it would just be a lot of fun. Because also, again, if you didn't want to wait, you could sell your share to somebody else.
Yeah.
So I think the NFTs would actually be a really neat way to track that process across a 20-year time span.
That is beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
It's also a hell of a commitment. Like, hey, buy in now and you get your last bottle in 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, you're out selling those in front of a hospital, in front of the birthing centers. You're like, hey, look, get this, bring your kid in.
Yep.
And I know I said 1 question each. I'm going to ask 2, but
go for it.
That's my option. Do you have any idea what the New York wood will impart on the bourbon, or is this just a complete shot in the dark? But you're going like full in on, I'm going local regardless.
So probably a bit of both.
Okay.
I mean, the interesting things, we've got a slower growing season than they do in the Ozarks.
Yep.
So like the Minnesota wood, it will take longer for those wood sugars to release. There should be more wood sugar in there because it's more densely packed in the tighter rings. We are in the acid rain belt, so the wood should be slightly more acidic, which will change that mouthfeel and how it interacts with some of those things and how the tannins come out. So it should take longer. We're projecting that though our normal whiskey comes due in 3.5 to 4.5 years. We're in a 30-gallon barrel. We're projecting that these will take more like 5 to 7 years, but should have a richer, almost mapley characteristic.
Oh man,
I'm getting some maple in the upper part of my thing anyway. With
I
your
think
bourbon,
that's because the last drink you took was from maple syrup, John.
No.
For what it's worth, that mixed with bourbon cream is also very good.
Oh, I bet.
In fact, there's very little mixed with bourbon cream that's not pretty good.
All right. Jason, I know we've kept you late. If you need to drop off, we totally understand. We got about 10 minutes left to go. If you want to stick around, you're more than welcome to. But at the time we're talking about maple syrup and bourbon cream and everything else, it's time for me to call. Last call. Time to clean house and lock the doors. You know what we do here, folks. We're looking for a little bit of help from you. John Ruyak, if the folks want to follow us on the social media platforms, how can they do so?
Well, you can follow us on Twitter. That's We Like Drinking 1. It's a numeral 1. Instagram is just We Like Drinking. And our tavern Facebook group is welikeDrinking.com/tavern. It's you ask to join and we say yes. And then you're with the cool kids.
I let in like 10 or 15 people today, so it was quite fun. Jason, one last time, if folks want to follow Black Button Distilling on the social media platforms, how can they do so?
So best is just to head to our website, blackbuttondistilling.com. We've got all of it there. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So yeah, most of them you can just find as Black Button Distilling, or occasionally it's Black Button 85 if distilling made it too long. Those are our two handles.
Understood. Jeff Solomon, if the folks want to leave a review on the show or anything else, where can they go to do so?
Hey, those of y'all watching live, as you ought to do every Tuesday night around 7:30-ish Pacific, make sure at welikedrinking.com/show or on YouTube, make sure that you click that like and subscribe button and flick that bell. You left a comment during the live stream. Go back later and leave a comment for the upload. But those of you listening on your phones to the podcast, audio only version, 2-time award-winning audio only version podcast. Go ahead and look at that phone, fill up those 5 stars that are in your favorite podcast catcher app. It's probably Apple Podcasts, and leave us a review by just smashing the autofill button, and the words will be funny, and that's what we like.
And visit welikechunky.com/pledge to find out more information about becoming a patron of the show and helping us keep the wonderful lights going. And don't make us shut down. For as little as $1 a month, you can help keep this train wreck going each and every week. You can also find the show notes for this episode with all the links to the stories or mentions we had at welikedrinking.com/episodes. All right, folks. We've reached the time of the show where I get to say, okay, panel, let's take one last trip around this table and get some final thoughts before we shut off the lights. John, this should be fun. Ruyak.
So I know everybody that's listening just thinks I'm the smartest person on the planet. So yesterday, I was Marcus and James at my assistant brewers, and we're going in and we're taste testing the apricot mango cider, the Bavarian Pilsner, and the Mexican lager that we've moved into the cold room for aging. And we go in, and we were talking to the owner, Dan, and he's in and he's tasting all this stuff. And he leaves, and he closes the door in the cold room, and we've got these 4 gigantic 20-barrel bright tanks that are just like 600 gallons each of all these products. And we're all done tasting these things. And we go out to the door, and we can't get out. So I got my phone. So Dan, he's like, yeah. Have you left yet? It's like, no. We need a little bit of help. It's like, what the fuck? I said, we're locked in the cold room. He's like, what if I don't want to let you out?
Then we're gonna drink the beer in the bright.
That's what I said. We're gonna drink all the beer. He says, "All right, I'll be there in a second." He comes
Jeff Solomon,
and he can't open the door. He can't get the door open. And finally, we jimmied it, and we're open. And I'm here. It was fun. You had to be there. It was fun as fuck.
Jeff Solomon.
I wish you would go back there, John. No, I was just thinking, and I'm sorry, I started like chuckling while Jeff Eccles was begging for money for our podcast. We like drinking.com/pledge, because I think what we need to do for emphasis just for the live stream, because we do have a beautiful stream, but right when you start to talk about like, please help keep the show afloat, I just want to see one of the shelves, like you pull a trigger behind you and it just falls. I think that would just class it up.
Jason Barrett, any final thoughts before you? Obviously, your drinks are very good, I think is the biggest takeaway you have from how this show is ending. But any final thoughts before we let you get out of here?
Well, gentlemen, I've greatly appreciated the time. If you ever find yourself in Rochester, New York, would love the opportunity to drink with you and show you what we're doing. And that goes for anybody watching this. Stop in on us in Rochester or look us up, blackbuttondistilling.com. We're going to keep doing crazy stuff, and hopefully people keep buying it, because that's what keeps us in business. Also, it does make a good pillow companion. That's an unknown feature of the gin. You can cuddle with it at night. And bourbon cream for the morning, obviously.
It's very cuddly, but yeah.
There you go.
I mean, I've been known to jump around, switch bottles up every once in a while, but
tonight, I mean, as long as you don't sign a prenup with any of your bottles, that's fine. You just keep that moving. As long as they're all aware, it's an open bottle.
Yeah, I see. You just have to be honest with the gin. Like tonight, gin, I'm all about you. I might have some bourbon tomorrow. Sorry, deal with it.
And I've got a real cute rum I'm going out with this Friday night. Just saying.
Jason, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Thank you so much for sending us everything that you sent us. Obviously, you're now realizing that was a poor decision to send us all this many bottles. But this is... Listeners, we like a lot of the stuff that we taste on the show because, we do like drinking. But this is some really unique and delicious stuff that I would highly recommend seeking out in your local liquor store or visit blackbuttondistilling.com, because the gin and the bourbon cream, these are some really, really good products, and they're really unique and something that you should probably check out. So make sure you do that. So Jason, thank you again for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And with that, I'll say thanks again for joining us at the We Like Drinking podcast,
where you'll never drink alone.
Now everybody go pass the fuck out.
Dude. Man.
Hold on, John. Before you take up 10 more minutes of our time with some random story.
Do the Harlem Shake.
Viewers, Viewers, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was awesome seeing you out. JVB said Jason loved the bourbon cream. He's up in New York. It's delicious. We'll try more of your product. Keep up the good work. Brad, thank you guys all so much. Thank you for joining us. And
Brad knows about Frog and Toad.
Brad knows about Frog and Toad. He knows that book. So we will see you all next week.